Hi everyone, thank you for joining today's webinar. We're just going to give it 1 minute to let everyone join before we get started. Hi to everyone who's just joining. We're just giving it 1 minute before we get started with the webinar. Amazing. It is 12:01, so I think we'll jump straight in. As mentioned, thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Bethany from the Big Give team. On the call with me, I have Sahil, also from the Big Give team, and Aisha from Shape History, who I'm sure will be introducing herself very soon. Just for the next slide, please. Before we get started, I just want to go over some quick housekeeping rules. I'm sure all of you have used Zoom already, but at the bottom of your Zoom panel, you'll see a chat box function. If you click on that and set your chat reply to everyone, you can use this to introduce yourself, share any ideas and thoughts throughout the session, and also share if you have any issues. You'll also see a Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom panel. Please do click on that and type in any of your questions. We'll make sure to address them at the end. No question is silly, so please do use that throughout the webinar. If for any reason you do need some captions, there should be a show captions button at the bottom of your Zoom panel. Please click on that and you'll see a live transcript of the webinar. And of course, with all of our webinars, they will be recorded and available to watch on YouTube after the session, so you can share amongst colleagues. And if for any reason we don't get to any of your questions throughout the session, or you think of something afterwards, please do send us an email at hello@biggive.org and we'd be happy to support you there as well. But with that, I'll pass straight on to Aisha.
Thank you, Beth, and hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Aisha Gardner. I am a strategist at a social impact communications agency called Shape History. We've worked with Big Give for a few years now on developing the creative directions and concepts for their different match funding campaigns. And I'm joining the call today to introduce you to the Green Match Fund 2023 Creative. The purpose of the webinar really is to introduce you to the campaign, show you how you can incorporate it into your communications plans, ultimately to increase donations and amplify your campaigns to the public. I think I'll be presenting for about half an hour, and as Beth mentioned, do feel free to put any questions in the chat, but then we have held about 20 minutes for questions at the end. So yeah, we look forward to having more of a conversation at the end. So without further ado, we're excited to introduce you to the campaign concept and creative for the Green Match Fund 2024, which is 2 for 1 for nature. So I thought the best thing to do to start off with was to just kick off with a bit of background as to kind of how we got to this final creative direction, and really the objectives that led us there. So, I mean, the big goal this year is to make the Green Match Fund the way to take action for the future of our planet. And the assigned truth that we've basically grounded the creative and campaign direction in is that no one likes missing out, and that this is ultimately the deal of the century. We really wanted to pull into some of those, I guess, emotive drivers of the public, that it's a 1-week opportunity to donate. And that's really kind of what led us to the creative direction that we've ended up with. I guess the organizing idea that you should hopefully see within the messaging and also the visuals is that this is basically the flash sale for saving the planet. And I'll go through a bit more of the narrative on the next slide. So just to kind of hopefully bring this to life a little bit, this is kind of the narrative that we're working with, that will feed into a lot of the creative assets that we develop, including the flagship asset for the campaign. So I'm just going to read it out because I think it helps kind of bring it to life. So, hey, big savers, are you ready to make a difference? Are you ready to take action and protect our planet? Well, hold on to your hats because we've got news that's going to knock your socks off. For 1 week only, we're teaming up to tackle climate change head on, and you won't believe the deals that we've got in store for you. Whether you want to save the bees or the rhinos, support local green initiatives, or forge sustainable systems, you can make double the difference. That's right, folks. For 1 week only, you can make big savings for wildlife and more. You can donate and we'll throw in the same amount. There has never been a better time to make your donation count with the Green Match Fund. It's 2 for 1 for the planet. So this is very much kind of the creative direction that we've landed on. As you can hopefully sense, it's very much around like sales, a one-off opportunity, double the donations for 1 week only to save the planet. And this is kind of what it's working up to be visually. So in terms of the campaign hashtags this year, we've got hashtag Green Match Fund, as always. But then in addition to that, as kind of a secondary hashtag, we've got 2 for 1 nature. So within kind of your social media and campaigns planning, we encourage you to kind of use both of them. But in terms of the hierarchy, as you may have other, I guess, hashtags that you might want to use across individual charities, the Green Match Fund is kind of the priority. But hopefully you can see with the kind of visuals that we're going with, it does feel very much like this, like sales, really trying to drive people to galvanize together for this 1 week opportunity. But then I guess the way that we wanted to spend the rest of this webinar is just to talk about how you can use this campaign. So we've obviously developed this overarching concept, and you'll see this throughout a lot of the assets that we develop. But very aware that you have your own campaigns that you might want to incorporate some of this messaging within. And so we wanted to give you some key messages and some top tips to apply it for your comms and towards your audiences and your followers. So first of all, here I've just developed, I guess, a little bit of a messaging grid, which I hope will be helpful for incorporating the 2 for 1 for nature campaign messaging within your plans. So at the very top, because of the urgency of the campaign and the fact that it's just 1 week, we're leading with for 1 week only, nature is 2 for 1. But then we have 3 kind of secondary messaging that sit within it and can be woven in and incorporated at different moments. So the first one here I've got is the biggest deal on the planet is taking place between the 18th and the 25th of April. And then second, we have the big give will double every donation you make to hundreds of green charities. I think this can be obviously personalized to be very specific about your charity, but just really making clear how match funding works, because in the past that's been kind of a bit of a barrier with the general public audience as to what exactly it means. So we're very much just going with big give will double every donation that you make. And then the third and final message here is your planet-saving donations will be doubled. Really just bringing it back to the fact that this match funding campaign is for the planet and for the environment and for the climate. In terms of the tone of voice, hopefully you've started to sense this through some of the materials I've shared so far, but it's very fun. It's collaborative, and by collaborative, it's to my point around really garnering together for the planet, the sense of building like togetherness, everyone working towards this for 1 week. And then finally, the urgency. Of course, this is just like a 1 week opportunity, but also the urgency of saving and working towards the planet as well. There's a few routes to incorporate a sense of urgency, but really we found that incorporating more urgent language and into content has worked really well within our campaigns in the past. To go into this in a little bit more detail and how you can apply and incorporate some of these messages within your plans and towards your existing supporters, I want to talk about 3 areas today. So the first one is impact focused and specific. So really, when we're thinking about how you might want to incorporate the campaign messaging into your communications, we really would recommend incorporating how match funding will have an impact within your work. I have some examples on the next slide, but very specific examples like planting 1 tree can double to 2 trees, and really just trying to bring to life what you offer as a charity and who you support or how you work towards the planet, and being very specific about that is really important to kind of take the basis campaign messaging that we've got and making it relevant to your work, but also creating a sense of specificity for the audience and for your supporters. The second one I've mentioned, but it's a sense of urgency. It's just 1 week. There's only 1 opportunity to do this for donations to be doubled, and really just like repeating that across your comms. And then finally, emote, educate, action. This is a bit of I guess, like a communications theory of change. Just to think about when planning out your content and your messaging, the different ways to ultimately get your supporters to donate during this week. I'll go into more examples of this on the next slide. So here we go into more detail. So when we're talking about impact focused and specific, this can be done in a couple of ways. So it can be done literally about the impact that it's going to have in terms of, for example, here I've got 1 solar panel can become 2, but also like bringing this to life in terms of donations. What can £5 do? And therefore, through the match funding process, what will £10 do? And thinking about all the different examples that you can bring in here is a really good way to just like make this match funding feel real and tangible, and for your supporters to see the difference that this could make, whether it's £5, £100 or more. Likewise, if you're working with animals, or to make it a little bit more emotive as well, you can talk about, I've got an example here, kind of 2 hedgehogs will be saved instead of 1. So numerous different routes to do this, but it's a really good way to kind of take our core messaging and make this specific to yourself, and really put on the emotive drivers of your existing supporters or of the public who might be interested in donating to you during the match funding week. Within urgency, I've mentioned this, but it's just 1 week only. I think there's things that we can incorporate before the week to just, I guess, drive anticipation and excitement around this. Also, like keeping your audience updated. So throughout the week, you could consider multiple messages on, okay, we've raised quarter of our donations. This is what this might mean. And just keeping them up to date on where you are in terms of your targets, and then connecting that back to impact is another way to kind of drive urgency and hopefully drive those kind of final days of donations and fundraising. And also, yeah, being transparent about your targets before we go into the launch week, actually saying what you're aiming to fundraise and what this might mean. This kind of transparency as well can drive a lot of the kind of pull on a lot of the emotive drivers of the audience. And then finally, I've talked about this a little bit, but the emote, educate, action, this can be woven across your messaging. But I guess really just asking yourself when planning content, why should people care about this? What can their money do? And then what do we want them to do and when? And just making that really clear, how they can donate, through what's the website link, and continuing to kind of be educational in that sense. On the next slide here, I have basically just made some recommendations of how you might want to drive anticipation and awareness of the campaign and this opportunity ahead of, during, and after the week. So the first one here, I guess, is just like building understanding of Green Match Fund campaign. So first things first is announcing the appeal. This can be done from now, and I'll talk on the next slide about ways to do that. But in the run-up, we've still got, a few weeks ahead of the week itself. So you could think about incorporating messages around more detail on the appeals focus and how to give, like just preparing some of that information. You'll be available on the Big Give website through this link, and just setting that up and continuing the communications in advance of that. You could also consider countdowns and reminders regularly, 3 weeks to go, 2 weeks to go, 1 week to go, one more day, just, I guess, to really capture the attention of your existing supporters, those who might already follow you, might already receive your newsletter or be reading your comms. And then we have the launch week itself. I mean, in terms of planning for this, we want to make a really big splash, a big buzz. Of course, we'll be talking you through what we have planned with the Big Give, but also very aware that you have ambassadors, your own impact stories, lots of content that you can think about compiling together during this launch week, really just to push that kind of impact and the why now. That's going to be essential to kind of driving those donations during this week. Likewise, as I mentioned on the previous slide, during the week, there's plenty of different comms that you can do, updating on how much has been raised so far, how much is left, and just continuing to remind that it's there, and just for 1 week. Like, this is really where we want to make a splash. We want lots of charities participating in comms, whether it's sharing what we have planned, but also your own content as well. Demonstrating what donations so far equate to in terms of impact. That's a really nice way to kind of hook onto just how much more could be donated, and what that might mean for kind of who you work with. And then finally, we would always recommend this kind of 24 hours before it closes, final reminder. There'll be people who have seen it but are waiting. So across all your channels, we would consider that kind of 1 more day to go type comms within launch week. And then finally, follow-up. Really, really important when we're thinking about converting audiences who maybe are not your regular supporters, maybe became engaged during this week because of all of the content that was going out, but actually translating them into long-term supporters, or just generally like kind of following and being interested in what you're doing. So we'd always recommend kind of immediately after the campaign closes, following up with a bit of a thank you, how much was raised, and what that's really going to mean for the charity. But then, like, in later weeks, we'd also recommend reporting and being transparent around actually how that's being implemented, and specific, you could take photos of how the money raised within this week is going, already being spent for some great work toward the planet. So continuing to just report back, this is really, really helpful, and might lead kind of to regular donations in the future. We have also developed a Trello board, which is basically going to host all of the assets for the campaign, and we really do encourage you to use this. We're hoping that this will save you a fair amount of time as well, and we want to provide you with all of the assets for the campaign to share yourselves, but also to personalize. We are going to be developing content and assets before the week, during, as well as like impact, kind of, this is how much we raised assets for afterwards as well. So this is kind of I guess a toolkit, a digital toolkit that's going to house all that. And we can kind of share the link and everyone will have access to that. But I just kind of wanted to point to, for the purposes of this session, an asset that's already available for you to use. This is basically an announcement asset, just to say you're participating in Green Match Fund 2024, and it's already there for you to kind of share. We've included all the kind of essential information for the campaign, the hashtags, then like content for other types of channels. So Instagram stories, there'll be stickers, there'll be lots of different types of materials depending on the channels that you prioritize. So really just wanted to draw your attention to this today, just to show you that it's there, and hopefully it's kind of going to house everything that you might need for the campaign. As I mentioned, we'll have like ready-made assets, but also going forward, there'll be options to kind of add your logo. You can see here, for example, and personalize it based on your impact, how much you've raised. So then the final section for today is just a few more details on communications and marketing. As I mentioned, we're a social impact communications agency. And so we basically wanted to share some kind of top tips around how we're going to be communicating from Big Give channels, but also actually things that you can think about doing to help. Appreciate that resources sometimes limited. And so these top tips should hopefully help with planning in advance of the week, but also then maximizing where you want to spend your time and resource during the week, really just to try and promote you're participating, both your existing audiences, but also actually trying to reach more people as well. So first off, I guess we wanted to share with you some of the plans for the Big Give over this week, and really where you can see this campaign. So of course, this is always available for you to share, repost, take photos, and share on your channels. But we will be running the campaign on billboards, out-of-home advertising. We'll also be sharing across our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, and X. And then we're also prioritizing media as well. So keep an eye out on our channels for as and when we share all of these. But I hope you get the sense that this is very much a multi-channel campaign, out like in the real world, in media, but also digitally on social media. Really, the approach is to create a buzz in advance of this and then convert people to actually donating during the week. So that's kind of our marketing plan in the coming weeks. And yeah, I mean, I guess what we wanted to do is share some top tips on how you can build on this. These assets, as I mentioned, will be available on the Trello board for you to share yourselves, but also appreciate that you might be working towards creating your own content that can kind of feed into this. So we kind of wanted to give some tips about how you might be able to do that and what's worked in the past as well. So here is a bit of an ecosystem of different types of communications and marketing channels that you might want to consider prioritizing. Ultimately, we want to create this like ecosystem of noise, whereby your audience are seeing this communications across many different channels. The more times they see it, the more times they're reminded, the more times they're likely to convert into the ultimate action that we're looking for, which is the donations. So in addition to the Big Give content that I mentioned, the out-of-home adverts, the social media and the press, you could also consider prioritizing some to develop yourselves. Particularly because you know your audience well, you know what they're kind of what's going to emote them and drive them to donate. So there's a number of different channels you might consider developing some content for in line with the creative concept that I've outlined previously. So just to pull out a few here, I guess local press and radio is a strong route. I know that a number of charity partners that we work with have their own kind of ambassadors, celebrities, trustees, all of which have a really like strong voice and able to talk to why to support you specifically. So we'd really recommend utilizing them if you can, and getting them involved with the campaign, whether it's a video, whether it's a quote, and really just kind of galvanizing their specific reach to support on your channels. Likewise, I guess your own channels, like if you have a e-newsletter or blogs or physical newsletters, posters, if you have regular channels that you use a lot, this is a really good opportunity to kind of talk to the why specifically donate to you and then link them back to the Big Give website. And then events and also community centres and spaces. We know that a number of the charities that are participating will be attending events or do have physical spaces. That's really great to kind of maximise to bring the campaign to life in the same way that we're kind of doing with the out-of-home advertising as well. So that it's not just kind of housed and seen on digital. One thing I would say though is, you know your audience, you know kind of who you want to reach, and really just considering the channels that they spend their time as kind of priorities. When we think about social media specifically, I wanted to share this slide, especially when we're thinking about fundraising. In terms of the best channels to engage your audience with that ultimate ask of donating, we find that Facebook and Instagram should kind of be where you put the majority of your resource and time. Twitter and LinkedIn are really, really important also for building that credibility and awareness. And for example, with Twitter, it's far more normal to regularly post. So that might be where you put the regular comms, the countdowns, the updates daily in advance of and during the week. But in terms of where you might best want to use your time if resource is limited, Facebook and Instagram would be where we recommend. And then Twitter and LinkedIn around that credibility piece, long-term, and driving kind of long-term support for the charity as well. The other channel that we wanted to talk a little bit about today is TikTok. I know that it's a channel increasingly is the most popular, and it's also the most trusted for the general public as well. So, I mean, when's a better time to give it a chance if you haven't already than this campaign, when we've got loads of charities participating and the support of kind of the Big Give content that we're going to, and assets that we're going to be creating ourselves. So, I mean, in terms of TikTok today, I wanted to share TikTok for Business actually released a report for kind of trends of 2024 just a couple of weeks ago. And I thought it'd be helpful to just share some insights from that today. Really, if you are considering using TikTok as a channel for this campaign, and how you might want to do that if you've never done it before or if you've not done it too many times. So, I mean, I guess the first point is that TikTok has just completely revolutionized traditional storytelling. Anyone can tell a story through TikTok, anyone can be creative, and that's really changed not just how stories are told, but actually who tells those stories and who drives that engagement and is trusted. So if you are considering TikTok for fundraising, and during this week in particular, back to my point around celebrities and ambassadors, or I guess who can tell the message about the impact of your charity and why it's important to donate to you. We really would recommend just considering who you might want to work with to create this content, who you might want to be the face of the TikTok video or the message that you're putting out. That might be charities, it might be your ambassadors, but also might be your employees. It might be long-term supporters of the charities who have donated for years. Main point here being that it comes from not the comms team or maybe the people who are creating the content, but actually from who's best to tell the message. And that kind of links to my second point here around bridging the trust gap. So what TikTok is doing is this long growing gap between the public and businesses and how much the public are trusting businesses' communications. TikTok is really closing this, and it's because it's fostering, I guess, transparent communications and value-driven content. So when considering any content that you want to create for TikTok, really just back to my point around who's best to say the message, leaving the briefs open for them to incorporate what they want to say, include their own personality, their own thoughts and opinions, giving them a little bit of trust, goes a really, really long way on TikTok. And those that are authentic are much clearer. And then finally, I guess just a point around the fact that TikTok is being used as a search engine. People are literally turning to TikTok to get answers to very specific questions that they might have, or specific interest areas that they're looking for more information on. It's become a search engine in itself. So if you're thinking about approaching TikTok for this campaign, and you know your audiences, you know who is likely to donate, before kind of developing the content or thinking about the angle or the story, we'd always recommend to just ask, like, what might they be searching for? You might usually traditionally think about this, what might they be searching for on the internet? What are they interested in? And then that's where you build kind of your content strategy for TikTok, about how you can be part of that conversation. If dog lovers, for example, are searching like cute photos of cute videos of dogs like reuniting with their owners, something very specific like that, like always just kind of approaching with what they might be searching for, to switch off, or when they're looking for answers to questions, and approaching your content through that knowledge. Building on this, TikTok is, of course, a kind of short form video channel, as is Instagram increasingly. So I guess I just wanted to include a slide here just on developing that. So we will be creating videos and short form video content ourselves as part of kind of the flagship campaign and assets, which will be available for you to share from the Trello board that I shared earlier, but also to repost from Big Give channels. But to the point earlier around, your ambassadors and the stories that you want to tell within this campaign, we would recommend trying out and creating short form video content. It is without a doubt the most engaging and popular form of content there is right now. So even if resource is limited and you have a certain amount of time to create assets and content in addition to the ones that we're developing, we would recommend prioritizing your time towards video content if you have that kind of capacity and availability within your team. We would essentially recommend you can do this in a very much like content creation approach. It doesn't have to be super sleek and over worrying about editing. Again, these channels, like TikTok, it's all like content creation. It can look just as good and authentic when it's being created on like a phone, than putting loads of like resource and money into making it super sleek. So yeah, really just a point here around being willing to test this out if you haven't already, and investing in trying out a short form video content. Next, we wanted to just touch on AI and how the sector is leveraging it. I think increasingly it's being used, I'm specifically talking around communications and marketing here as well, to streamline and make work more efficient. And when we're talking about resource being limited, when we're talking about lack of capacity or availability, AI can be a really, really helpful tool. Of course, there's kind of criticisms and concerns around some elements. So I basically wanted to just share kind of how it's being used within our agency, within comms, within social media teams, in-house, and just some top tips on using it that might support kind of your planning and your content creation for this campaign week. So yeah, I guess like as a bit of background, AI can rapidly process vast amounts of data and make things far more efficient, and do things a lot more quickly. So within the communications industry, AI is mostly being used for streamlining and also for varying content. And so I've got here kind of 4 key areas that we're using it for, that might be helpful. So I guess firstly, the top point here is around proofreading. So utilizing tools like Grammarly can be really helpful for just a quick sense check of spelling and grammar for social media posts or newsletters. If you're limited on time and you don't have time to kind of go away, look back at it, Grammarly and other AI tools can really help with that. And then secondly, I've got a point here around simplification and plain language generation. I think this is really, really helpful, especially when we're talking about the climate and the planet, where it can be they can be full of technical jargon and complicated messaging. AI can be really, really helpful to simplify that. And just to break it down in a way that's understandable for diverse audiences, for people whereby English might not be their first language, and really just to translate what you want to say to the general public. Prompts are, of course, really, really important. A common prompt that we kind of use here is rewrite this technical jargon-filled paragraph in plain language that's suitable for the general audience, the general public. Connected to that, around copy and optimizing your copy, is that AI can be used to support for varying your copy, but also injecting a tone of voice. So I mentioned earlier on around the messaging house I shared that obviously this campaign is developed to be fun, to be collaborative, and this might not be the natural kind of tone of voice that you traditionally use across your channels or your content. So if that's kind of not the usual way that you're used to writing, but you want to try and inject some of that tone of voice within your content, AI can really, really help with that. It can enforce style guides and it can enforce tone of voice within copy. Particularly, this is helpful for social media, and AI can be really helpful for varying your social media copy, where sometimes it can feel like you're approaching the copy or the sentences in the same kind of structure. You can ask AI to mix that up to vary the type of content that you're developing as well. And finally, on this point, there's also tools that can actually help with social media posting and optimization and scheduling. For example, there's a tool called Buffer, which can help with schedules and optimizing content. When is the best time to post? How many times a day is best to post on a Tuesday? Those tools can be really helpful. Again, if resource is limited, you don't have the time to think about this in a lot of detail around your content plan running up to and during the week. There are tools that can support with that as well, notably Buffer. And then the final point here, just on leveraging AI, is on analytics and reporting. If that's something you're kind of interested in, how participating in this campaign has increased your website traffic, for example, or had an impact on the amount of raising awareness of you as a charity or as an organization. Things like Google Analytics can help with that. And likewise, Google Data Studio is a great tool to support with kind of making visual reports with data. So just some top tips there around using AI to optimize your work and to support with kind of content generation and development. I guess just to be clear on the best way to use it. Firstly, being very clear on your objective. Why are you using AI? Is it to support with proofreading, simplifying a document, injecting tone of voice? Being clear on what that objective is can really help frame the prompt that you need to input into your AI tool. And secondly, just on prompts, of course, all these platforms take a very similar structure. They all kind of rely on the same principles, which is that within the prompt, there needs to be kind of like a keyword, a topic, and the question or the prompt that you want to generate. This can sound very simple, but it sometimes is the most time-consuming element of AI. So just by having a very clear objective, that can help frame your prompt and make sure you're kind of getting the most out of the tools. And then just final slide from us before we go into the questions is around the use of physical space. I've talked about AI, I've talked about digital tools. but very aware that a lot of organizations operate and interact with your audiences in physical spaces. And it's really, really important to remember that and not forget that that's one of the best ways to capture people's attention. Within the assets that we're going to be developing, we will be including some physical posters that you can get printed or stickers. I suppose our concept in itself is around sales and discounts, which lends itself very much to like physical spaces, whether it be like at a fundraiser or even in like your office windows or shop window. It's very much like this like sales, just like you see in kind of retail, and that's going to be part of the assets that we create. So do consider and don't forget about those physical spaces where you do interact with your donors and your audiences. For example, some of the assets that we'll be creating that you can print will have like a QR code, so you can get those up sooner rather than later. On that point around driving anticipation ahead of the launch, ahead of launch week, and yeah, really maximizing all the opportunities that people might see you in person and in real life. Time. We held around 20 minutes for questions. Beth, am I okay to hand back over to you to facilitate that?
Yes, definitely. And thank you, Aisha. It was really useful webinar. Lots of interesting tips and tricks there to take away. Just a few questions in the chat at the moment. So one person just wanted to double check that it received the slide deck after the call. And the quick answer to that is yes. We'll make sure you have access to these slides so you can take them away. Another question is, does the Trello board also include suggested key dates for posting? As a very small charity without a comms marketing team, it would be amazing to have a structured guideline for posting so it stays impactful and doesn't become spam.
Do you want me to take that one, Beth?
Yeah, happy to, and then
Yeah.
I can add some more to.
Yeah, we can definitely, I think that's a really good suggestion. And of course, kind of within that Trello board, it's to try and make things easier for those with limited resource. So we can definitely include some recommendations. We can build on, back to my slide here, around kind of the flow of messaging. We can build some recommendations on actually specific dates that might be best for that, both before and during and after. So I think within the kind of information section that we have on the Trello board, campaign info and updates, we can include a bit of like a social media strategy on posting and scheduling.
That's great, thank you. And also just to know on the board, a few kind of slides down, there is a section about Big Give plans and resources. So in that I've added a tab just about some of our comms milestones and some of the key dates where we're posting. So that's good as well, just for your own information, if you're wanting to post things out on certain dates that we're going to be particularly active. So that might be useful for your reference as well. We have another question here. Would you be able to share some of those AI tools, please?
Yes, was the question specifically about the names of them?
Yeah, maybe if you could share some of the names, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I can add it into the slide deck before we share it over. But the most common ones that we use, so for proofreading, Grammarly is the one that we kind of use the most for, yeah, spell checking and grammar. For the simplification and varying copy, we tend to mostly use ChatGPT. And then for the social media scheduling, I think I mentioned Buffer for that. But what I'll do is I will add these specific links and names within this section here so everyone has kind of links to those.
Amazing, thank you. Another question here, just around when the Big Give assets will be available on Trello and how they access them. So I have included the link to the Trello board into the support section of the portal. So if you've logged into your charity portal, go to support under Green Match Fund. It should be under like marketing assets or marketing resources, one of those. You'll find the link to the board so you can access it from now. Aisha, might be helpful if you could just also put the link into the chat, just for anyone on the webinar at the moment for easy access. But yeah, it's available from now. And with Trello, if you haven't used it before, essentially we'll be able to continually update it. So you can be able to check back and see more and more things added as we get closer to the campaign week. So don't worry if you don't see anything. Some of the things aren't on there at the moment. That is all the questions that we had on here at the moment. Sahil, I don't know if you had any more.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I'd just probably like to remind anyone on this call just to accept the offer of participation that we would have sent you I think it was last week. So please do accept that offer, so confirm your place in the campaign. And the other thing is, if you cannot access your campaign page, it is because you have not uploaded your bank and trustee details. We would have emailed you with this information. So please do get on that as soon as possible, just so you can access your campaign page, and so you're campaign ready as well. You don't want to be doing things last minute. So that's, just want to add that to anyone that has questions about that.
Thanks, Sahil. While you're talking, one question did actually come in. So we had question said, what are your thoughts about posting short form video content for channels other than TikTok or Instagram?
It's a good question. I would say if you're creating the content and investing the time, it's still worth posting on like the likes of LinkedIn if it feels appropriate with kind of your LinkedIn audience, and also Twitter. However, I would say like where the engagement for short form videos mostly sits is on TikTok and Instagram. Facebook as well. I think that's a common channel for some audiences. So it's worth reposting. It's still worth sharing it if you have developed it. But I guess as a flag, you might approach them very differently if you are thinking about one video for TikTok, for example, and then how you might do the same kind of video or messaging for Facebook. So potentially think about which channels you want to prioritize first, and then develop the video based on that. But having said that, as I mentioned at the start, very much we want to create a buzz in advance and during this week. As much content as we can get out there, the better. So it's still helpful and worth resharing if it's not the priority channel. Anything to add to that, Beth?
I don't think so. I think that's all really helpful. And of course, I know YouTube has like a shorts option as well. So another potential is like uploading it as a short on YouTube. I'm not sure how long the time frame is for a short. But that means there's also potential to kind of link the video into like email comms, for example. I know you can link also directly to social media if you want to, but as email is a big driver when it comes to our campaigns and getting people to the platform, any ways you can kind of promote that video outside of social media as well, you could also explore. Another question here, we don't have many exciting ambassadors. Would you recommend using our CEO as a spokesperson when developing short form video content? Do you have any other suggestions for previously successful spokespeople within charities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to say being very channel specific for the CEO, but I think that's a really, really valuable person to talk to the campaign. But I also think maybe if you have this available, to think about who you could have in a video with or alongside your CEO. For example, campaign like videos that have worked well in the past is where, for example, a charity that was working with young people, the CEO was interviewing an expert young person kind of in the same video. So I guess like the CEO is a really, really helpful person to talk to, I guess, the vision and the like broader strategic direction of the charity and the impact. Though I'd really recommend thinking about who else can support with telling that story. I also think, like, I think I touched on this briefly, but like staff, even within the charity staff who are maybe doing more of the implementation, or maybe aren't based in the office but are doing more work on the ground, for example. That's a really, really nice way alternative to the CEO, especially on maybe the content channel, the channels that the trust point and the authenticity point is more required, like the TikToks and the Instagrams. But yeah, I would think outside the box, like look around your office, think about who you talk to in email a lot. And oftentimes, like, you know, just people involved within the organization have really powerful, emotive impact stories to tell. So consider that as well. But in answer to the CEO, I definitely would say yes. LinkedIn, Twitter lends itself really nicely to those kind of channels.
I don't know what charity this person's from, but like some charity, like if you're like a wildlife trust or a community farm which we're supporting through the campaign, like speaking to the people that visit your sort of area of work, that I'm sure they'll be great advocates for your work and be able to sort of really simplify and explain why they love your work and why support you. So that's another possible sort of audience that you could speak to in your video.
And also, if you have kind of existing video footage of your work or the beneficiaries that you support, or your farm or whatever it is, to kind of supplement that video content as well, that could be good to kind of portray your impact. So even if you had like a fundraiser talking about your campaign, but then you had supplementary video showing the impact of the work, that could be really impactful as well. So yeah, don't not use your fundraisers or volunteers or anything, because they can all still have really big impact. Amazing. I think that is the final question. So with that, I just want to thank you again, Aisha, for a really great presentation. As a reminder, I'll make sure the slides are available for you to access, and the webinar recording will be available this week on YouTube as well. Please do join us for our next webinar. But in the meantime, just thank you all and hope you have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.